Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is a 2023 superhero film, based on the Marvel Comics superheroes of the same names. The film is a sequel to Ant-Man and the Wasp and Avengers, Endgame. It is the 31st film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the first installment of Phase 5. The film was released on February 17, 2023. The film is directed by Peyton Reed and stars Paul Rudd as Scott Lang/Ant-Man, Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne/Wasp, Jonathan Majors as Nathaniel Richards/Kang the Conqueror, with Michelle Pfeiffer as Janet Van Dyne, Michael Douglas as Hank Pym, Kathryn Newton as Cassie Lang/Stature, David Dastmalchian as Veb, William Jackson Harper as Quaz, Katy O'Brien as Jentorra, and Bill Murray as Lord Krylar. Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne, along with Hope's parents, Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, and Lang's daughter, Cassie, go on a new adventure exploring the quantum realm that pushes their limits and pits them against Kang the Conqueror. After helping to save the world from Thanos, life has been going pretty great for Scott Lang. He is liked and respected in his hometown of San Francisco, and has even written a successful memoir. Things are also going well for his girlfriend and fellow Avenger Hope Van Dyne, who now runs her own company and is using Pym particles to help the world, as well as her parents Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, who are just happy to be reunited following Janet's 30 years trapped in the quantum realm, although Janet still refuses to talk about her time there. The only bone of contention for Scott is that his Cassie, who is now living with him and Hope, has been arrested more than once due to her participation in protests. After Scott and Hope bail her out, the two have a mild argument where she accuses her father of enjoying his fame and not actually doing anything to help the world now it isn't under an immediate threat. She also accidentally implies during the conversation that she has her own supersuit, although quickly tries to shrug it off when her father inquires further. They head to the Pym residence to have dinner, and the conversation turns to a device that Cassie and Pym have been working on, a quantum satellite. They explain it's designed to try and send a signal into the quantum realm to try and establish communications. Janet freaks out when she realizes that someone could send a signal back and demands it be shut down. However, the device ends up imploding and sucking in the 5, along with some ants that Pym had been experimenting on to increase their intelligence. The Pym/Van Dyne family are separated from Scott and Cassie and land in a completely different part of the quantum realm to the two. Scott manages to rescue Cassie from falling to her death before confronting an alliance named the Freedom Fighters as Hope and Pym are guided through the quantum realm by Janet, who later brings them to Axia to meet an old friend. Scott and Cassie perform a ritual to understand the Freedom Fighters' language, learning of a man who managed to conquer what was once the home of the Freedom Fighters. Upon meeting Janet's friend Krylar has the ruler's guard attack Janet's relatives, leading them to escape in Krylar's ship. The Freedom Fighters are also soon under attack by the guard and MODOK, whom Scott and Cassie find out is none other than Darren Cross, who is now deformed from the Yellow Jacket suit's destruction and has been left with a massive head but tiny limbs, necessitating him to use a hover chair. While Scott is arrested and forced to make a deal with the man named Kang, having to retrieve the multiversal power core. Janet explains to Hope and Hank that Kang the Conqueror was a scientist also trapped in the quantum realm who attempted to fix his time chair, only to have Janet sabotage his departure because she realized from his ship's engine that he had destroyed several timelines and took countless lives, and hadn't actually crashed in the quantum realm as she'd assumed, but was exiled there. As Ant-Man, Scott shrinks into the enlarged, blown-up multiversal power core, shrinking it with the Wasp's help. Because they rebel against him, Kang steals the power core from them, defeating Ant-Man and the Wasp and taking Van Dyne with him as MODOK crashes Hank's ship. Kang explains his origin and his plan to thwart the Council of Kangs for exiling him to Janet as Cassie evades captivity and frees the Freedom Fighters. Ant-Man and the Wasp meet Hank, accompanied by the smarter ants who have also traveled to the quantum realm. Cassie interrupts Kang's transmission to Axia, telling all residents to fight against Kang. Telling MODOK to kill Cassie, Kang is confronted by Giant Man, approaching Axia's center. The freedom fighters and the inhabitants of the quantum realm also help defeat Kang. Despite losing to his attacks, Cassie is able to get the best of MODOK and tells Darren that he has the capacity to change and doesn't have to be a dick all his life. With Ant-Man, the Wasp and Stature attempting to battle him, Hank calls his ants, which had arrived in the quantum realm centuries before the humans and developed their own society, to distract him. Convinced he has been acting horribly, Darren sacrifices his life as a hero in disabling Kang's force field he had made, allowing the ants to attack him, with Scott uneasily declaring Darren an Avenger when Darren asks. Janet opens a portal back to Earth until Scott, the last person to return, was blasted away by Kang. Kang attempts to kill Scott in hand-to-hand combat, but is sucked in by the distorting power core by Hope's assistance. Looking back at the celebrating freedom fighters, Scott and Hope leave the quantum realm. Now back home, Scott continues his happy life and orchestrates a fake surprise birthday for Cassie due to him missing so many. Scott briefly reflects on Kang's words and worries that he may not be dead or the door might now be open to the ones who exiled him, but decides not to dwell on that for now and focus on his extended family, believing the exiled Kang has died. The Council of Kangs calls every Kang variant in the multiverse. They discuss that the Avengers may have to be dealt with as they're not only touching the fabric of the multiverse but were even able to seemingly kill one of their own. In the 20th century, Loki attends a presentation about time with Mobius M. Mobius. The presentation being that of Victor Timely's, Mobius isn't worried while Loki is terrified.